Hello everyone, welcome to Big Data Thoughts. Today's topic is a very interesting one because this is something that people always try to find out, how to optimize Spark jobs. What should we do or what levers should we pull to make our job extremely performant and efficient? So yes, today we are going to look at how can we optimize the performance of Spark jobs. When we talk about optimization, there are multiple things that can be done. For example, we can have some things which we can do inside our code. We can have configuration level settings which are at the cluster level or at the level of our job. There can be file formats which are really optimized to be used with Spark. And there can be Spark optimizations, which means with every version of Spark, it becomes a better version of itself. For example, in Spark 3.0, there are a number of features that have been added specifically keeping in mind the performance aspect. But since this is a very big and complex topic in itself, today I would be concentrating on the code part of it. But going forward, this is just the part one. Going forward, I would be making videos on all of the other factors as well. So let's get started. Before even looking at what improves our performance, let us first understand what are the different things that will affect our performance so that we can keep a watch on them. So first of all, one thing which really affects our Spark job performance is the shuffle operations. Now, as we had seen in the previous video about the Spark APIs, and we had spoken about shuffle. Shuffle is nothing but an operation or Spark's mechanism of redistributing data, so that you are grouping data differently across partitions. What that means is whenever we are writing a transformation, a join or a repartition, these kind of operations will force Spark to move data from one executor to another on maybe different nodes as well. So essentially what it is doing is it is causing a whole lot of network IO, disk IO and data serialization as well as deserialization because you are transferring data over the network. So definitely it is going to affect our performance. What kind of operations invoke shuffle? So operations like repartition, coalesce, group by key, reduce by key, co-group and join. All of these kind of operations will invoke shuffle and in turn it will affect the performance of our job. So this is one of the factors, and there are ways in which we can actually control this shuffle operation. There are multiple parameters that Spark provides, like Spark shuffle compress, which means when we are shuffling the data we can compress that so that there is a minimum amount of data that is getting transferred. Then there are certain buffer sizes that can be specified for our shuffle. Okay, so there are n number of such parameters, but the most important thing to keep in mind is whenever we are using these kind of operations, we need to think twice because that will involve shuffle. Another thing is when we do transformations, there we can have two types of transformation. One which is a narrow transformation. Now narrow transformations are better because here the data exists on the node itself where the transformation is happening. Okay, so this is not a big threat, but there are situations when we have wide transformations. Wide means that the data needs to be moved across nodes in the cluster, and that is where you would have shuffling. So definitely by the definition itself we can see that wide transformations would cause a performance hit on our job. Depending on how much data the wide transformations are shuffling across, it will affect the performance. Now, yeah, the problem is definitely that there is shuffling. Now, these are the two things at the code level, but now there is something else apart from, at the code or software level which affects the performance, that is hardware. Now we all know that Spark is a in-memory processing system, but it's not that it doesn't utilize disk at all. And this is something where I have seen people get confused thinking that Spark is in-memory. If we have a lot of memory, it will just work and we don't really have to optimize. That's a myth. We have to optimize no matter how much memory we have, and there are situations in which there will be a usage of disk as well. For example, even while shuffles, there are spills to the disk. There can be settings where we actually say that we want to persist data to disk. We will see that in a bit, but there are situations when we are actually doing disk writes. Okay, now these, when we of course when we are doing disk writes and there is a shuffle and all that, there will be a performance hit, but we need to keep in mind the kind of hardware that we are using, because ultimately our jobs are going to run on the underlying cluster. So the disk, the cores, the memory, the network speed, all of this is important. So all of these, apart from memory, we have to take care of the type of disk, whether we are using SSDs or what are we using, how much memory we have, how many cores are available, and of course the network speed. Now let us look at the code optimization. So we have looked at some of the factors that affect our performance, but now we'll concentrate on at the code level, what are the optimizations and how can we do it. So first of all, the most important thing is to check the Spark UI or the logs, because they tell the whole story of your job. On the Spark UI, there are multiple tabs like job, stage, executor, SQL, storage. These are extremely important and they give us lots and lots of information. So each of these tabs, if you can go through and see in detail, it will show you in the job how many stages are there, how many tasks are there in a stage, and within that it will show detail set of each and every stage and task. So it is important to go through the Spark UI, and that is our first step to performance optimize our code. Within job you will have stage and task. You can even look at the DAGs at stage and task level. At the task level, there is something called a quartile. So what it shows you is, it shows exactly the duration that the task took, the garbage collection time. Sometimes the garbage collection time is very relevant because it is quite a lot, and we can have many configurations to actually set up a different garbage collector. So that can be seen. The input size of the records can be seen. This can give a valuable information in terms of how much data is there on that each task is processing. The shuffle, read size, etc. So there is a lot of information on the Spark UI. That's the first step to look at. Then the second step is to minimize scans. Now this is one of the most important things to do, because whenever we run a job, there is going to be a data scan, because we are ultimately operating on the data. How should we minimize those data scans? What that means is, if I can reduce the amount of data that Spark needs to read for my transformation or operation, that will definitely make my jobs faster. What are the things that I can do to make the data scans fast? The most important thing we can do is partitioning. So if we can partition our data on a relevant column, which is going to be used in my queries. So how do I partition? I need to keep in mind what are the kind of queries I'm going to fire and get the results back. So what are my read queries? Based on that, I would partition so that it goes to a targeted partition and the data read, the quantity of data read is small. Then there can be bucketing that can be done. Now bucketing can be done, but we need to be little mindful while doing bucketing, because managing buckets is a bit of an overhead. But bucketing can definitely be done in certain cases depending on our use case. Then there can be partition pruning that we can do. We can do filtering. We can add filters to our queries to go to the target relevant data. And one more thing which is important to keep in mind is avoiding data skewness, which means that some of our data, so when we are distributing the data across the cluster, the data is getting distributed. If the data gets distributed unevenly, then there will be data skewness. Some of the nodes will have majority of the data and rest of the nodes will not have that much data. Now that is going to be a big problem. The data needs to be uniformly, if not exactly uniform, but at least somewhat uniformly distributed. So there are techniques like sorting, etc. that you can do. So you add a random number to your key so that all the data do not land into one partition or one node. So sorting can be used for avoiding data skewness. Then another thing which we can do is join optimization. We are going to use joins, that is for sure. Our queries would need joins. Joins, as we saw, would need shuffling. Hence, it is very important to look at what kind of join do we really want to perform. There are multiple joins that Spark has. In fact, with Spark 3.0, there are join hints that can be given. The simplest form or the safest join is sort merge. When both of the data sets are large that we are joining, safest is sort merge. When one of the data set is small, that time what we should use is a broadcast join. That is the fastest, because what will happen is the smaller data set will get broadcasted to all the nodes or executors participating in the operation. And there are thresholds that you can set. So there is a broadcast join threshold, which is by default 10 MB. If data is less than 10 MB, one of the data set, then it gets broadcasted. We can tweak that number, but default is 10 MB. That will help because the join will be faster, as the smaller data set would be available on each and every node. So while doing the joins, we need to think about what suits our data and accordingly give the join hints. Then as we all know, definitely join is expensive, but sometimes we can't avoid joins. We have to do it, so we optimize the joins. But there are certain other operations which are extremely heavy, like doing a count, doing a repartition, or a distinct count. Now in production scenarios, I'm not sure where ideally we should be using count. There should not be any need to actually do a count, because it is going to scan through the whole data. I mean, it has to count the whole it has to operate on the whole data set. So count should be avoided. Repartition should be avoided at all cost. Typically we do repartition when we want while writing the data back, we want certain partitions to be created. But repartition is very expensive. A better option would be to do a coalesce, because it creates lesser number of partitions than the existing partitions, and it doesn't do an entire shuffle of data. But repartition is extremely expensive because it can increase or decrease a number of partitions, which essentially means that you would be shuffling data across the network. So it should be avoided. Distinct count should be avoided. So there is something called approx discount distinct, which will give you an approximate value of your count, and that should be sufficient for most of the purposes. So we should avoid count or distinct count. Okay, what else we can do? So there is a method called drop duplicates. We can do drop duplicates before join. We can do drop duplicates before group by, because that will help in the join. If we drop the duplicates before doing a join or before doing a group by, because these are expensive operations, if there are duplicates and we drop it, it will help us to reduce the data that is getting transferred. Another thing that we can do is persisting or caching. So these are essentially the same. There is no distinction between persisting or caching. Caching is a part of persisting. Now it helps in reusing the data in subsequent operations. It's a simple cache concept, just like we know we do caching. It's similar to that. It's very good for iterative kind of algorithms or fast interactive usage, because the caches are fault tolerant in Spark and they can reduce a lot of burden of recalculation or doing the same calculation again for subsequent operations. The benefit, of course, is faster actions. It is fault tolerant, and it can be stored using different storage levels. So we have memory only, disk only, memory and disk, and there are variety of ways in which you can store the cache. So essentially you can tell Spark that do you want to cache it in memory, or you want to cache it in memory and disk, or disk. So there are different ways in which you can tweak it. Only thing that we need to keep in mind while we are creating or persisting data is it can have a lot of garbage collection overhead. If we create too many caches of data, then there will be a garbage cleaning overhead. There can be a slowdown, there can be disk spills because your memory can get full. So we should not overuse or abuse the cache functionality, only use it when it is necessary. Then broadcast variables. Now broadcast variables are very handy when we want to have a read-only kind of a variable which we want to cache on each and every machine. So what will happen is whatever is in the broadcast variable is going to be shipped to each of the tasks. So wherever the task is running, this copy of the broadcast variable will be sent. So every task will have access. So just like in broadcast join, we are transferring the data as a read-only set, the smaller set, to each of the nodes to operate on. It is the same way. The broadcast variable is used to have the variable there, but only thing is this is going to be read-only. And it can be very helpful when we want to have, when there are tasks running across multiple stages and they need the same kind of data. How do you pass data between them? Then you use broadcast variables. You can also cache this data. This is like, it is providing you benefit of sending the data that is a common data across the nodes. But it is read-only. Another way of sharing data is accumulators, but these are shared variables and they can be actually used as a counter or as to store aggregated information, because they are something that can be manipulated, meaning they are not just read-only copies. We can use them as counters, we can edit them. So use this to implement counters, or if you want to count how many times our API was executed, or what are the number of corrupted records, any kind of these kind of aggregation things or information that we store, we can store it in accumulators. All of these will actually help in increasing our performance, because we are not doing any kind of writes etc. to disk or anything, or doing any other mechanism to pass on variables or add. Because if today I want to track API access and I start storing that count in a database and keep incrementing it, it will be an overhead. Instead, if I use a Spark accumulator, it is much more efficient. Okay, what can be other properties apart from whatever we saw? What else can we do at the code level? So some other things are, we use for each quite a lot, right? Now if we use sequence.par.forEach instead of just for each, then it can help us in achieving parallelism. Only thing to keep in mind here is, if we use this, it gives us parallelism, but it can have race conditions or non-deterministic results. So we have to see how we can synchronize our methods, or how we can use accumulators and others to avoid this kind of a condition. But definitely sequence.par.forEach is better than the for each method. Now another thing to keep in mind is, we use Spark UDFs in some cases. These are user defined functions. When we need certain custom behavior, we write UDFs and register them with Spark. This should be avoided, because first of all, it's a custom logic, so Spark auto optimization will not work on that UDF. Secondly, what will happen internally is, the UDF will operate on each row. So in your data set, if there are 1 million rows, the UDF has to actually read each row, deserialize, apply the lambda function, and then serialize. So it's a bit of overhead. So if possible, we should completely avoid Spark UDFs. Okay, so this is a summarization of whatever we discussed till now. So what we need to keep in mind is, we need to keep in mind what data scans are we doing, how can we reduce it by using partitions, filters, bucketing, partition pruning, all of that. What kind of a hardware are we using, that is also important in terms of disk, network IO, cores, memory, etc. We should utilize caching or persisting wherever possible, so that we can reutilize the data set which we already transformed. The joins that we are doing, we need to look at what kind of joins we really need, whether we should use broadcast joins wherever applicable or not, and can we give join hints to Spark to use. Then we should avoid all the expensive operations as far as possible, like the ones we saw, repartition and those kind of operations. And the biggest thing to do is always go through the Spark UI and look at whether there is data skewness, how much of a memory I am using, how many tasks are there, how many stages are there. Look at the DAG to see what is happening, how much data is getting read, how much data is getting written. That will give a lot of cue to us how to optimize. In fact, there are tools also called, so one of the tool is Unravel, that helps you to actually look at your job in terms of, it gives you very pretty graphs, and it can tell you how many executors you are actually using, how many are you releasing, and what data is going across the network. So tools can be used, or we can look at the Spark UI. So this was all about performance optimization factors that are triggering our performance to become bad, and also code level optimizations that we can do. I hope this helped you. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the other factors like what Spark has provided inbuilt as optimization, as well as file formats and configurations. So hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot.